Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Experience podcast, inside the business, buzz, and brilliance of Black entrepreneurs. Here is your host, Dr. Frances Richards.
Bonus episode 456. Bonus episode. Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black entrepreneur experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. Our next guest is co-founder of Accreditation Advisors Group, AAG, and former owner and founder of University of Antelope Valley, UAW. Welcome, Marco Johnson.
Thanks, Dr. Frances. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. I've given our audience such a brief bio. Why don't you fill in the gaps and share with our audience what you'd like them to know about you and your business?
Sure. Thank you for that. I grew up in a small town just outside of Los Angeles, Lancaster, California. And at the time I was growing up, the population was about 60 to 65,000. It's now at 156,000. My wife and I met in middle school and attended high school together. I went off and attended college at the University of Hawaii, and my wife stayed local. I graduated from UH with a degree in political science and marketing. And from there, I was fortunate enough to be drafted into the National Football League. I spent 3 years kind of bouncing around in the league. And I come from a line of EMS workers, firefighters, paramedics, first responders, law enforcement, and also military, and then a few civil servants. And about 3 years after 3 years in the league, I was able to fulfill a lifelong dream and became a firefighter paramedic for the city of Los Angeles. And while on the department, I began teaching CPR and first aid classes on my days off. I'd go to the station and come home, and my wife would direct me as to where I was teaching a class that day. One thing led to another. I started an EMT program, then a paramedic program, then a nursing program. This was in the late 90s. Fast forward to last year, 2022, we had grown the institution into a regionally accredited traditional university with about 1,500 to 2,000 students throughout the year. Athletics, on-campus housing, meal plans, about 30 different programs, from certificate programs to graduate degree programs, online, on ground. It was a full-fledged university. And last year, June 2022, we sold the institution to an international group. From there, my wife and I gathered our wits for about 6 months, and then we decided it was time for us to get back at it. So we founded AAG, Accreditation Advisors Group. Essentially, what we've become is a boutique operation that focuses on businesses or groups or individuals in the higher ed spectrum. We help them with seeking and receiving accreditation, adding new programs, faculty development, and a number of things across the board. That's where we are. My wife and I founded AAG, and we've been up and going for about just under a year now, and we're excited to move forward.
Who would be your ideal client?
It varies. We try and keep it small, so to speak. We don't like to get beyond 5 to 6 clients at a time. We're currently working with a local community college that is seeking to add an EMT program. We're working with a nationally accredited institution that's looking to become regionally accredited. We're even working with a group we have a meeting with them later this day, that's looking to establish a private high school, an accredited private high school. So it's across the board, any group or individuals that are looking to get in the education space. We even have one group that we're working with that's looking to transition from on ground to online education.
Tell us the backstory about selling your university.
Yeah. Oftentimes we get, when we say we co-founded a university, it's like, wait, what? How'd you do that? How does that work? All right. So it's a long, drawn out process. I summarized it pretty quickly, but it was a couple of decades to get to that point. At the end of the day, our institution was accredited by the same accrediting agency that accredits Stanford, Cal, Northridge, UCLA. We're in the same family, the WAS family. Because we were privately owned, we had the ability to bring in either partners and or sell the institution. And we decided that we had wanted to, our mission statement, when we first designed our mission statement years back, was essentially to provide quality education for our local and global community. Well, we felt that we had done a fairly strong thing and had been successful on the local level. And when I say local, not just in our local community, but in the region. But we hadn't really tapped into that global other than online. So we intentionally, we had been approached by groups over the years, but we wanted to find a group that was more focused on the international playing field, and that group that had the ability to reach out to on an international level and had established themselves on the international level. So a group from Singapore came in, said all the right things, they ticked all the right boxes, and that was the group we sold to.
What is a lesson that we should know about that space going into accreditation? Because that is a really, when you're talking about compliances and everything, and I've gone through, that was my background in higher education. So I've gone through several accreditations. And so for boots on the ground, it can be extremely stressful, but you can imagine for the university.
Yeah, it's a daunting task. Yeah. And it's one of those things that and processes that you have to kind of tick away at. It's not something that you can just fill out an application and make it happen. There's a lot of data that has to be gathered. There's a lot of research that has to be put in place. There's a lot of moving parts. And working with our regional accreditor, it wasn't just our regional accreditor who accredits the institution as a whole, but there are programmatic accreditors as well, say for our nursing program. That's an entirely different accreditation that we have to go through. For our EMT program, that was a completely different accreditation we have to go through or had to go through. So there's a number of moving parts, and you have to methodically work your way through it, and you have to be patient about it. A lot of individuals who approach my wife and I now are like, hey, the first question out of their mouths is, how quickly is this going to take place? Yeah, it's a marathon, most definitely. And the key, one of the keys, there's a number of keys, but one of the keys is to know that going in, and that to strategically map out your progression and how you plan to get there over a period of time, because it won't happen overnight.
What is your zone of genius? Why are you here?
Zone of genius. That's an awesome question. Without trying to sound patting myself on the back, I think that my comfort zone is leading by example. I think that is a very key trait that I won't say good, but solid leaders have. You have to be comfortable with whom you are and how you approach things, but you have to be even more comfortable with others approaching you. And a solid leader gives off that type of vibe or that type of energy that he or she, their coworkers, are comfortable approaching them on any subject matter and feeling okay and safe to express themselves. So I would say my zone of genius would definitely be leading by example.
Talk about marriage and growing, building a business and entrepreneurship.
I chuckle because my wife and I heard that often, right? It's tough to be married and not grow and develop a business together, right? So we kind of approached it as when we first got started, we were kind of stepping on one another. That was way back when I was on the fire department. So we kind of step on each other at the office, but then I'd head to the fire station and we kind of have time to cool down for 24 to 48 hours and then come back. But you have to, one, know how to segregate work and home life. Secondly, I think that we began to excel once we realized and decided who's responsible for what. And our overall vision was always the same, but we had our own responsibilities when it came to the company. And when we were at the office, we had to, if someone were to approach me and ask me something, say about finances, I knew that was my wife's wheelhouse. If someone came to her and asked about operations, she knew that was my wheelhouse. So we would immediately punt to whomever that was and make sure that whomever was approaching us knew that our spouses were in charge of those areas. But it can be tricky because you come home and you find yourself still talking about the business, right? When most spouses and partners go home and they have different work lives. But we worked our way through it. And I think, again, having our own specialties or things in our wheelhouse was very important. I'm sorry to drag this on, but we would often go full days at the company and not see one another, and wouldn't see each other until we got home that evening. So I think that plays back on having our own responsibilities and staying in our lanes.
And was that intentional or it just happened organically?
I think initially it was, we had to figure out something because it wasn't working, right? We were kind of stepping on one another. So we kind of sat back and we sat back and decided, okay, how do we make this work without taking things home? It kind of was presented to us, and then we had to figure out how to make it work. It was intentional.
Let's talk about going from the NFL to firefighting into education.
Yeah.
And if you look back over life, was that the plan or did you just fall into that? How did that come about?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Going from college ball to professional ball to firefighting and paramedic was more of a natural transgression. And that was the plan. My plan was to one day be the chief of the fire department. That was my goal. And my wife's plan was to have a legal career. But sometimes higher calling or intervention steps in. And I started teaching CPR and first aid on my days off from the department because my wife had a couple of miscarriages, and I had gone on a few calls and had seen that lives could have been saved if only CPR and our first aid had been initiated. And it wasn't because individuals didn't want to give CPR or first aid or provide CPR and our first aid. They just didn't know what to do, or they were afraid to do so. So started teaching the CPR and first aid on my days off from the department. And then again, one thing led to another: EMT, paramedic, nursing. So again, oftentimes there's a path laid for us that we're really not aware of, but we knew it was the right thing to do. And at the time, our community, and to this day, our community had not had its indigenous university. We had a couple of branch campuses here from other state schools that just didn't really work, and the community didn't really buy into. But once we founded UAV, the community totally bought in.
What's next? What's on the horizon?
Yeah, that's a super question. I think that right now we're excited. Well, let me back up a step. Once we sold our institution, my wife and I were like, that's it, right? We're tapping out. All right, we're headed to Hawaii and going to paddleboard for the rest of our lives. Again, like I said earlier, about 6 months into it, we're like, okay, this isn't working. Yeah, we've got to figure out something and stay in the mix, so to speak. We think that with the AAG, this is a really exciting time for us. It's really fun for us to share all of the information that we've gathered. Dr. Francis, my wife and I plugged away for, a quarter of a century, and we had our noses to the grindstone, not realizing the knowledge that we were kind of banking away upstairs. And now it seems really second nature when we're working with clients and they ask questions to us that we recall that at the time we were in their shoes was awfully confusing and a little bit intimidating. But now those things are really, I won't say simple to us, but we're very comfortable with those areas now. So I think that in terms of what's next, enjoy our kids, enjoy each other, enjoy our free time, travel, but enjoy the opportunity that we've been given to help other institutions or individuals grow.
I want you to have a monologue, and I want you to name this person, living or not, and they've inspired you so much. What are you saying to that person and why?
I think there'd be two individuals, and there'd be my mom and my dad. They had me at a very young age, and they never tapped out. So I would say to them, Mom and Dad, you guys led by example. You guys have shown me what it means to love your child. You have shown me what it means to nurture your child. You have shown me by example what it means to get up and grind and the importance of grinding. And most importantly, both of you have shown me the importance of being a faith-based person. So I'd like to thank you, Mom and Dad, for demonstrating to me pure love, pure examples of how to get things done, and also being a kind person and putting others before myself.
You talked about starting the university. What was that backstory when you're seeing this evolve and grow? Because it's one thing when you have like one or two courses, but now you have a full blown university. What was that aha moment? And what was that year that you're like, whoa?
Yeah, there were a lot of awesome accomplishments along the way. But again, my wife and I, we had our noses to the grindstone and not really realizing what was evolving or developing around us until we reached that in 2016. We reached the regional accreditation and we show up at a final workshop. And me, as the president of UAV, I'm sitting in the same room next to the president from UCLA, the president from Stanford, the president from San Diego State, you name it. We're all in the same room. And these young men and women knew my name and knew who I was, right? So I think that was the point when we said to ourselves, okay, I'm not going to say we cracked that ceiling, but we're now at the table. We're now in this same realm without really realizing that we were going to get to that point. Our goal was our community again had been desiring its own traditional university for years. So our goal was to provide that for our community. And I think that aha moment again was when we realized I started getting emails from other presidents from other institutions and them asking me questions like, hey, dude, how'd you do this? Right? How do you found a university? I've been a president throughout the system for years. And so that was really, really encouraging. And again, at that point, it was an aha moment that, okay, I think that we're at the table now.
How did you raise money for capital to start?
Yeah. So my wife comes from a very challenging background to where money was not plentiful. So with my wife overseeing finances, we sat out and decided we're not going to take a loan, right? So everything was carried out via money raised through the institution, tuition. Again, if I go back to day one, it's just CPR and first aid classes. We literally had to borrow mannequins from the local fire department in order to teach our classes, right? And then my wife would sock away a portion of the revenue received until we got to the point where we could purchase our own mannequins. Same thing, that same process happened with our EMT program. Then it happened with our nursing program. So we're very fortunate, other than real estate, taking out loans to purchase real estate, we never borrowed a dime to fund our project and the company. Staying true to our initial goal and staying true to, again, staying separate and trusting my wife as the CFO and having complete confidence in her. When we sold the institution, it was debt free. And we've held on to the real estate, which is a point I would love to share with anyone that's listening, that if you're going to sell your business and you own the real estate, it's not a bad idea to hold on to it. It becomes a passive income and becomes an opportunity to keep your mind stimulated, so to speak.
At any point in the deal, did they want the real estate?
Yes, most definitely. It's fairly valuable. And again, we purchased real estate back in early 2009 or so. And we purchased the campus, then we purchased a facility to house our athletics. And they did want to purchase both pieces of property, but that was not in our plan, right? So what we did do with them was gave them 2 years for first right of refusal. So if we did decide to sell within the first 2 years after selling, they had the opportunity, if someone made an offer, to counter that offer. So that was as far as we went because we didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves. But yes, they did want to purchase the real estate.
And were you legally advised to do that, or that was you guys' idea all along to keep?
That was our business plan. And I'm sorry to interrupt with that. Other than our company, our biggest returns, our RIOs have been in real estate. We've watched other real estate purchases grow, and we've kind of taken that approach: buy real estate, rehab it, rent it, refinance, and repeat. Right? We've been doing that with smaller properties along the way, in addition to the larger commercial properties that we own for the institution. So that was our plan. We had after we had seen that over the years working, we've decided that we're going to hold on to these commercial properties as well.
So talk about, you've seen a lot of ebb and flows in the market, in the real estate industry, also in California, living in California, as well as the pandemic. Talk about managing, sustaining, growing, and even staying afloat in those downturns.
Yeah, and in terms of real estate, my wife and I have a close friend that's been in the real estate game for years, and he's always advised us to diversify, right? Don't just go with commercial. And this is for, I speak in general terms. This is for individuals who are in a position to do this, but don't just put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. Don't just go all commercial. Don't just go all residential. Don't just go all mixed use. So along the way, we were listening, and we did go with a mixed bag, so to speak. So commercial properties really, through the pandemic, we didn't see a big hit there. Where we did see a hit was in residential, where tenants weren't mandated to pay rent. Having those other revenue streams was very, very important. And now those residential properties are coming back on the line. I think where we were very blessed and fortunate from a business standpoint during the pandemic was that we were able to transition our education from traditional on ground to online. We were fortunate in that sense, didn't have to shut our doors. For the most part, we maintained all of our employees and staff and faculty. Students got to stay in school. And one of the things we did, and I apologize for getting off track, one of the things we did when the pandemic hit was we had phone calls and emails and Zoom meetings with the parents of the students to let them know, hey, when Junior's at home or when Sally's at home, we're going to stick to our same schedule, class schedule. So if she has chemistry at 6 a.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, she's going to have chemistry at 6 a.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, even though it's via Zoom. So parents were involved. And throughout the pandemic, we also had meetings and webinars for parents just to keep them motivated. So we were fortunate in that sense in terms of the business, is that we were able to just transition. It wasn't easy. It was a little complicated. We've got some faculty members that are more geared toward teaching on ground. So there was a learning curve for a number of us, but we made it through.
Do you go back to the university? Do you do speaking or make a pop-up appearance, or how is that working because you're part of the community?
Yeah. So part of the transition was that my wife and I would stay on as in more of a consulting roles for the first year or so. But what we found is that we had founded this thing, right? And so not just people from the community, but people from the institution would continue to approach us for decision making. And the new president and the new CFO and the new CEO, it was tough for them. We kind of exited from there just so we could punt. And everyone knew this was happening. So this was a 2-year deal, right? So everyone knew who the new ownership was. They knew who the new leadership teams were going to be coming in. But still, it was comforting for everyone to go see Marco and Sandra and ask questions. So I still attend athletic events. So we brought on athletics a few years back. So I still attend athletic events. But for the most part, we kind of lay low in terms of visiting the campus.
Speaking of athletic events, talk about how to make student athletes or athletics profitable for your school.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's very tricky. And I think that a lot of times an institution will get caught up in the glitz and the glamour. But at the end of the day, that's a very dynamic section of the institution that you have to be dialed in with. I think you do certain things I know there's certain things you do as you require certain roster sizes to be met. There are the NCAA and the NAIA, they limit the number of athletic scholarships you can give per sport. So you build your rosters to exceed those. You do a lot of fundraising and you win titles, right? When you win titles and win championships, individuals want to attend your institution for the athletics and for the academics. But I think it goes beyond that. Athletics And clubs, I won't just say athletics and extracurricular clubs on campus are attractive to other individuals. It's really cool when I see a young lady or young man who's a chemistry major or a psychology major, and they're not a student athlete, wearing a baseball jersey or wearing a basketball jersey because they're buying in. But it's just as awesome to see a student athlete standing up in front of a psychology course, and he or she's not a psychology major, and sharing their psyche when it comes to being a student athlete. Cross-pollinating these students across the institution is critical, because what you don't want to do, what we found, every blueprint may be different. What we found is that we didn't want to segregate our student athletes from the rest of the student population and faculty and staff. There are some faculty and staff who kind of pushed back initially bringing athletics on, but now those same faculty and staff are some of the biggest supporters. So it has to be open dialogue. You have to have your finances structured. And with NIL out there now, there's some opportunities, not just for the individuals, the student athletes, to gain things, but there are also opportunities for the institution to gain.
And for our listeners, you mentioned some acronyms, NIL, that they may or may not be familiar with. Can you share what they are?
Sure. NIL is name, image, and likeness. And now student athletes, being a former student athlete, I wish this would have happened years ago, but student athletes now have the ability to profit, be it monetarily, be it whatever the situation is materially, on their name, their image, and their likeness, so to speak. I'll give you an example of what we did on a much smaller scale at UAV when it came to our student athletes. And back to your previous question in terms of financing athletics, this was more of an opportunity to supplement our finances in athletics. So what I did was, even though I was the president of the institution, I loved athletics. So what I did was I reached out to a number of our local restaurateurs. And let me back up first. I reached out to all of our student athletes, and found out what their followings were like on social media followings. And come to find out, we had a few million followers when you tallied up all of these student athletes. So from that point, I went and approached a few restaurateurs and let them know that, hey, if you supplement our students' pregame meals and postgame meals, our students will give a shout out, so to speak, on their Instagram page on how good of experience or great of experience they had at your restaurant. Well, we had a number of restaurants jump all over that. And the only rule we had for our student athletes was there was no negative posting. If you had something that was negative to say, you let us know, and then we'll relay that to the business owner. But that's an opportunity to supplement. So in turn, what that did was that reduced our budget line, our commitment to paying for meals when our students went on the road or when our students were just in town. So you can take that for meal plans, you can take it to the local hotels, you can take it to the local car dealership and do something similar to that.
That's a great strategy. What's the strike down of race consciousness admission means for the future of higher education?
That's a question that I wish a lot more people would not be afraid to discuss. I think that there are a lot of institutions out there that have said that we're aggressively being diversity based. Now we're going to see, right, over the next 3 to 5 years. So it won't be immediately, but let's check back in about 3 to 5 years from now and check out where these institutions' stats are in terms of diversity. They're either going to be at the same plane they were before, or they're going to increase or decrease. But I think this is an opportunity for those institutions that have said that they are conscious about it. This is an opportunity for them to step up and show it. And again, it won't be immediate. It'll be over the next few years. We'll be able to circle back and see what type of, I want to say, growth has happened.
Marco, who is your top 2 influencers, mentors, and what lessons did they teach you?
Oh, wow. Dr. Francis, your questions are deep. I would say number 1 is probably my dad. Again, as I mentioned earlier, my parents had me at an early age, but neither one of them disappeared. My dad, although my parents lived in separate places. It was nothing for me to look up as a kid, a 10-year-old kid at baseball practice, look up and see my dad sitting in the stands, and the only dad sitting in the stands for practice. And he lived about an hour and a half away from where I did. At a certain age, it was decided by my parents, my mom who loved me so much, and my dad who loved me so much. It was decided by my parents that it was best for me as a young man to go live with my dad. And every morning I saw my dad. First, I love my mom for being able to do that and seeing that. And again, she didn't disappear. She's still in my life. She lives around the corner from us now, right? But to see my dad every morning wake up, and the first thing he does and did was fall to his knees, right? And give thanks for the day he's been given. And to see him get up and hump and go to work every day. My dad missed 2.5 days of work in nearly 40 years of being a welder. 2 of those days were when I was born and when my brother was born. And the other day was he suffered an injury, went and got his hand stitched up and went back to work. And so this was a guy who is as solid as they come. And he beat me in racquetball a couple months back. So I'm a little disappointed in that. So my mom and my dad, yeah, without question. Then there's my lovely bride. My bride is, she is the person that I know we were meant to be with one another. And her ability to see past what's in front of us and see what's in the future. And I'm very grateful that she's a part of my life.
Talk about that moment when you get drafted in the NFL. There's a lot of people, young men, that's their desire to make it to the NBA, the NFL. Yeah. But we know that it's few that makes it. And when you talk about the decisions your parents made, talk about that moment, even from your parents.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different world now, but you're absolutely right. That's a lot of goals, and now it's awesome to say it's not just the goal of young men; it's the goal of young women as well, right? That those opportunities are there for young ladies. Now there could be more opportunities, but it will get there. So it's a different world now when it comes to the drafts. I'll say drafts plural because social media, right? Oftentimes these kids know that they're going to be drafted in what round, what position, and by whom and when, right? So when I got drafted back in 1988, I literally got the phone call on the payphone in our on-campus housing, right? And someone yells down the hallway, "Hey, Johnson, you got a call," right? And I go to the payphone booth, and it's the Houston Oilers, right? The head coach and the offensive coordinator. And, they asked me, do you want to make it happen? I'm like, yeah, I definitely want to make this happen. But my goal was, again, to be the chief of the fire department. So I was very fortunate my junior and senior year at the University of Hawaii when I was playing ball. I developed this knack for blocking punts, blocking field goal attempts and extra point attempts, and also returning punts. I just developed this knack all of a sudden. It was like God just blessed me suddenly. And that's what got me drafted into the NFL. I was drafted as a kick return specialist. And it was definitely an opportunity and an awesome memory that my family, my friends, and I will never forget. It's an extreme blessing. I will say that there was one young man when I got to Houston that kept me grounded and let me know, don't get too big for your britches, so to speak. Don't live beyond your means. Stay humble. And that was Warren Moon. It just so happened that I was in the same locker area as Warren Moon. And back when I was at the University of Hawaii, the NFL Pro Bowl was played in Hawaii. And the NFL players, when they came over, if they wanted a tour guide, so to speak, they could have an opportunity to have one of the student athletes be their tour guide. And it just so happened that for a year, I was Warren Moon and his family's tour guide. So there was a connection there. So when I got to Houston, he was there and kind of took me under his wing, and it was an awesome experience.
Let's talk about advice you wish you had followed.
I think that, again, I listen to I'm like any other child, so to speak, a 58-year-old child, that I listen to 99% of the things that my mom and dad said. But I think listening to college student athletes when I was there that were dialed in at the time. You had the group of student athletes and students who were there partying. You had those who were just bookworms. You had those who were in between. But there were a number of individuals, young men and women, who had figured this out. And so the advice I would give to young men and women when they get to college, be it a student athlete or not, is to find a senior that, from afar, you're kind of watching, and find a senior that you think, okay, I'd like to emulate the way they move, right? Because the decisions you make in high school and or in college are the decisions that you're going to carry with you into adulthood. And I wish I would have grasped that concept a lot sooner. Even when I was in high school, I wish I would have grasped that concept. But there were a number of individuals at the collegiate level, not necessarily just listened to our advice, but just kind of followed their lead, and because they would lead by example. And I see a lot of those young men and women now, and I'm not surprised at their success because of the way they lived. And then inversely, I hope that someone sees me that way or saw me that way as well.
If you lost everything and you had to rebuild in 30 days, what industry would you rebuild and why?
I think that first, and this may sound weird or different, first I give thanks. I give thanks that, one, I'm alive, right? And I have an opportunity and the mindset and the capabilities of rebuilding, because some people lose everything and don't have that ability or that mindset or the opportunity. I think my wife and I are strong advocates of go with what you know, right? When you're sitting in a comfortable position, that's when it's okay to try things outside your wheelhouse. But when you've got to get down to the nuts and bolts, you got to go with what you know. And our wheelhouse, and there's a number of things in our wheelhouse, but EMS, education, and real estate, we would definitely hunker down and go those paths.
There are so many brands and businesses. Name a brand or a business that you admire and why.
Yeah, there are a number that I admire. I think that right now, recently, I've kind of been following and just from afar watching the NFL. They are strategic as strategic can be. You look at the NFL, their games are now covered on ESPN, ESPN Plus, ABC, NBC, CBS, Nickelodeon, Peacock, right? They're over in Europe now. That brand has just become a fixture, not just here in our country, but globally. And they continue to excel. They give back. So I would say NFL for sure in terms of a corporation. There are a number of individuals out there. I think one that's right now that's a little, and I say this because I was just reading his book, Lucky Me, Rich Paul. Right? This young man, and if you haven't read his book, it's for anyone listening, this is an opportunity to listen. And what I gained from his book was that a lot of us have similarities, right? And a lot of people come in at the end of the story or the end of the book, right? And you just assume that this person has it easy with their path of getting to where they've gotten, and what they're doing seems really simple. But seeing and reading his book just reinforces that we all have diverse backgrounds. We all have challenges, but we all have this commonality, right? Everyone's got a family member that's suffering through something or fighting through something. Everyone's had hurdles they've had to get past. Everyone's had rejection, but it's those of us who just keep kind of forging along and staying focused and giving thanks along the way and not being selfish while you're doing it, helping others along the way. So I would say the NFL, and right now, probably because it's at the forefront of my thinking, because I just finished his book, Rich Paul.
Marco, if you conducted this interview, what is the one question you would have asked yourself? I would like you to ask the question and answer it.
Again, that's a very deep question, Dr. Francis. What's the one question I would ask myself? Maybe if there's anything you would change about, would have or could have changed about your professional career, would you have done so? And I think, like most of us, even the most successful individuals out there and companies out there, oftentimes we look back and say, what if? What if I'd have gone this path? I think for me, I'm strong in the fact that and comfortable in the fact that the big kahuna up there had a plan for me. My plan was to be chief of the fire department, but things happened and I was led in a different direction. So I would say not necessarily change, but now that I know what I know, I'd get there a lot faster. And that's for sure.
We've come to the part of our interview. It's called Fun Facts Lightning Round. I'm going to ask you some very quick questions, and I'd like very quick answers. If there's something you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass.
Sure.
Are you ready for the Fun Facts Lightning Round?
I am.
What is your favorite comfort food?
I'm going to say bananas and strawberries.
The last movie you saw?
Equalizer.
You relax doing what?
Paddleboarding and hanging out with my son at sporting events.
Your favorite singer or rapper?
Marvin Gaye.
Your favorite dance song?
I would say anything with Bruno Mars.
What food you eat every week, no matter what?
Bananas and strawberries.
Your favorite month?
I would say May because I'm not sure if can I elaborate?
You can.
Okay. I would say because that's a great question. I would say because that's Mother's Day. I get to recognize my mom and my bride and my stepmom, who's an awesome young lady. And I also get to recognize both my wife and my daughter because their birthdays are in that month.
Oh, that's beautiful. Workout or hit the couch?
I would say workout, but you have to quantify what workout means, right? But workout.
Marco Johnson, thank you so much for joining us on Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast. Before we let you go, share with our audience the best way for them to connect with you and to do business with you, and feel free to leave all your social media handles.
Sure. Well, first off, Dr. Francis, this is an amazing thing you do. Congratulations to you. I had a few friends that heard I was going to be meeting you, and they were like, awesome. She is a great young woman. So thank you and congratulations to you. I think the best way to get a hold of me and or my wife is through our website, aagteam, the word team.org. That's aagteam.org.
Thank you. That's a wrap.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to Black Entrepreneur Experience. We would love for you to leave a review and rating on iTunes and share with your friends. For show notes and more episodes, go to www.beepodcast.com. Join us next Wednesday, and remember, green is the new black. So keep your bank accounts and your business in the black.